Once seen as a symbol of hope, Mayor Tiffany Henyard's downfall has stunned Dalton, Illinois. Once praised as a rising political star, Henyard now finds herself at the center of a growing scandal, and for all the wrong reasons. What began as a promising career full of ambitious plans to lift Dalton out of its slump has spiraled into a storm of allegations, federal investigations, and public outrage. Henyard's rise to power was swift and dramatic. She stepped into the mayoral seat after the sudden death of her predecessor, Frank Zuccarelli. Initially, many were skeptical, but she quickly won over supporters with bold promises, better services for veterans, stronger support for seniors, and ambitious economic development initiatives. By 2021, she secured a position through an election, further solidifying her influence. Soon after, she took on an even larger role, becoming township supervisor for Thornton, giving her even more control and reportedly pushing her combined salary to over $200,000 a year. However, with that power came controversy. Allegations began to mount. Critics claimed Henyard had turned the city government into a personal empire, funneling public funds toward her own lavish lifestyle. Reports emerged of luxury vacations, designer shopping sprees, and a $500,000 driveway constructed at her mother's house. Meanwhile, Dalton's financial health deteriorated. The city faced a staggering $3.5 million deficit. Public services crumbled, and residents began asking a simple but damning question. Where's our money going? As frustration grew among the community, Henyard tightened her inner circle. Those who spoke out were allegedly silenced, demoted, or forced out altogether. But the scandal exploded when the FBI launched an investigation. A raid on Henyard home captured national headlines. Sources claimed federal agents discovered millions in hidden cash and uncovered over $67,000 in travel expenses, racked up in just 5 months, all funded by taxpayers. These supposed business trips reportedly turned into extravagant vacations, 5-star hotels, luxury dinners, and motorbike rides, yet that was only the beginning. Residents were outraged to find billboards across town bearing Henyard's face, not as part of an election campaign, but allegedly self-promotion paid for with city funds. As basic public services languished, their mayor seemed more focused on her personal image than on governance. Then questions began to swirl around the Henyard Care Foundation, a charity she had launched claiming to support breast cancer patients. Insiders alleged it was little more than a front to funnel more public money toward her personal indulgences, vacations, designer goods, and even the driveway at her mother's home. Meanwhile, taxpayer dollars were reportedly used to manufacture t-shirts and hoodies emblazoned with her image, items she then allegedly sold for personal gain. Public outrage reached a boiling point. Social media exploded with anger. Lawsuits piled up. One particularly shocking lawsuit came from Henyard's former assistant, who alleged she was fired after reporting a sexual assault by a high-ranking official during a city-funded trip. The mayor's response was silence. Tensions erupted further at a chaotic town board meeting when activist Jedediah Brown called Henyard out publicly. Shouting and pushing broke out, with Henyard's boyfriend allegedly getting involved in the physical confrontation. The incident, caught on video, only fueled the community's growing fury. Despite the deepening scandal and mounting calls for her resignation, Henyard remained defiant. She posted on social media, quoting scripture, "If God is for us, who could be against us?" Rather than calming the situation, it only sparked more backlash. Many residents saw it as an out-of-touch response, a distraction from the serious issues tearing the community apart. Dalton, once filled with hope under Henyard's leadership, now finds itself buried under debt, dysfunction, and distrust. The leader who once promised transformation has become the face of scandal. Henyard's story, once a tale of promise and progress, now serves as a chilling cautionary tale of unchecked power, personal ambition, and political downfall. At the heart of the controversy lies the misuse of taxpayer money, none more glaring than the nearly $1 million spent on a personal security detail, a figure more fitting for a celebrity or high-ranking federal official than a small-town mayor. The security team, funded by Dalton's struggling residents, reportedly provided round-the-clock protection and even accompanied Henyard on personal trips. Allegations surfaced of overtime fraud, with one officer allegedly making $113,000 in just 2 weeks, while performing only $33 worth of actual work. As Dalton's financial crisis worsened, Henyard continued pouring public funds into vanity projects. Her face adorned billboards across town, even as roads deteriorated and essential services collapsed. These actions, starkly contrasting with residents' daily hardships, painted a devastating portrait of a leadership gone rogue. But the scandal wasn't limited to financial misconduct. Henyard's leadership style began to shift toward authoritarianism. Employees and business owners who challenged her authority were reportedly met with retaliation, wrongful terminations, revoked business licenses, and more. One particularly shocking case involved Boeing Thrash, a longtime employee in Thornton Township, who claimed he was fired after refusing to replace an attorney with someone Henyard's assistant had personally favored. Thrash also alleged that Henyard attempted to bribe him with $100,000 to carry out the switch. As the financial and ethical misconduct piled up, former allies began to break ranks. Carmen Carroll, once a trusted township trustee, became a whistleblower, openly criticizing Henyard's leadership. Carroll revealed an atmosphere of intimidation, describing how Henyard had allegedly used police officers to harass and silence critics, even sending them to opponents' homes to scare them into submission. This chilling abuse of public resources painted an even darker picture of Henyard's administration, one where dissent was not just discouraged but actively crushed despite mounting evidence and increasing public anger. Henyard doubled down. She insisted the allegations were politically motivated attacks by her enemies. But for the people of Dalton, the narrative didn't stick. As their roads crumbled and their town fell into deeper debt, the residents saw through the excuses. They felt betrayed by the woman they had once entrusted with their hopes for a better future. Henyard's extravagant lifestyle, luxury vacations, designer goods, billboard campaigns, stood in painful contrast to the daily struggles of her constituents. What was once celebrated as a story of resilience and renewal has devolved into a sobering warning about the dangers of unchecked power, ego-driven leadership, and erosion of public trust. As the FBI investigation pushes forward and more revelations come to light, the story of Tiffany Henyard is no longer about a promising young leader. It's about how ambition and corruption can destroy a community from within. Tiffany Henyard's grip on power continues to slip, as sources suggest. Her political support is eroding, and key allies may now be cooperating with federal authorities to avoid their own legal consequences. Despite her defiance and ongoing attempts to rally support through social media, Henyard's public response has failed to turn the tide. The people of Dalton, once hopeful for real change, are now grappling with the painful aftermath of broken promises, financial mismanagement, and a deeply tarnished legacy. Henyard's tenure, once hailed as a new beginning, has unraveled into a cautionary tale of political corruption and the dangers of unchecked power. Dalton faces a long, difficult road ahead, rebuilding trust, recovering from financial devastation, and reclaiming its future, all while the fall of Henyard stands as a sobering reminder what happens when public service is replaced with self-interest. What began as a hopeful chapter for Dalton has now descended into scandal and ruin. The collapse of Henyard's administration reveals the stark consequences of placing personal ambition above community needs. Among the most serious allegations is a lawsuit from former assistant Pete Dukes, who accused Henyard of sexual harassment during a taxpayer-funded trip. After reporting the incident, Dukes was allegedly placed on unpaid medical leave, a move widely seen as evidence of the toxic, retaliatory culture within Henyard's administration. These mounting lawsuits and explosive claims have cast a long, dark shadow over Henyard's time in office. Once celebrated for her boldness, she is now seen by many as a leader whose ambitions spiral into a dangerous obsession with power and control. The community she once vowed to uplift is instead burdened by the deep financial and emotional scars left behind under Henyard's leadership. Dalton's finances have spiraled into chaos. The town is now facing a $2 million deficit, with unpaid bills for basic services like tree trimming and street paving piling up. Since 2021, Dalton has failed to conduct the required annual audits, leaving its true financial condition shrouded in uncertainty. The crisis worsened with revelations of $3 million in unaccounted-for blank checks, a 21% spike in police department expenditures, and a staggering $65 million shortfall in the general fund. These financial bombshells have left Dalton residents reeling, especially as their town's infrastructure crumbles and public trust vanishes. In response to the growing outrage, Henyard has attempted to deflect responsibility, pointing fingers at former associates like her top aide, Keith Freeman. Freeman, who has since been charged with bankruptcy fraud, is rumored to be cooperating with federal investigators despite Henyard's attempt to shift blame. Her credibility continues to erode as mounting evidence and testimonies paint a bleak picture of her administration. What once looked like a promising political career, a symbol of hope and revitalization, has collapsed into a web of lawsuits, investigations, and public betrayal. Henyard's pattern of lavish spending, unethical behavior, and retaliatory politics has left Dalton in shambles. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence and growing public backlash, Henyard remains unrepentant, dismissing criticism as mere politically motivated attacks, a defense that is worn increasingly thin. However, the weight of financial documents, witness testimony, and legal challenges tells a much darker story, one where personal ambition and ego repeatedly overshadowed the welfare of the people Henyard was elected to serve. As Dalton struggles to recover from the financial wreckage she leaves behind, Henyard's once bright political future appears all but extinguished. Her administration has become a textbook example of what happens when power is wielded without transparency, accountability, or integrity. Henyard's story is not just about personal downfall. It is a chilling reflection on the necessity of robust checks and balances in public office. The people of Dalton, left to pick up the pieces, are paying a steep price for misplaced trust and unbridled ambition once celebrated as a rising star with bold plans to transform Dalton. Henyard's legacy is now defined by scandal, financial ruin, and rampant allegations of corruption. The hopeful chapter she promised has instead descended into chaos, marked by reckless spending, abuse of power, an atmosphere of fear and retaliation. At the center of the controversy is Henyard's pattern of excessive and ethically questionable spending. Taxpayer dollars were allegedly used to fund luxury trips, an inflated $1 million security detail, and self-promotional billboards plastered across Dalton. These expenditures occurred while basic town services went unpaid, deficits mounted, and no financial oversight was conducted for years. The contrast between Henyard's opulent lifestyle and the daily struggles of Dalton's residents only deepened public resentment. Critics accused her of focusing more on consolidating power and promoting herself than addressing the town's urgent needs. Alarming reports also emerged of Henyard's administration turning Dalton into a political battlefield rather than a center of community service. Employees were allegedly coerced into spying on political opponents and digging up damaging information on critics. Dissent was silenced, often using deeply troubling tactics. Some residents reported police officers being sent to their homes as a form of intimidation, a shocking abuse of public resources that further fractured an already divided community. As the fallout continues, a critical question remains: can Dalton rebuild? And can its residents ever trust their local government again? Henyard's intimidation tactics created an atmosphere where residents and public servants alike felt unsafe speaking out. Despite the escalating concerns and mounting evidence, Henyard continued to frame the accusations against her as nothing more than political attacks, a narrative that increasingly rang hollow. Her consistent refusal to accept responsibility only widened the divide between her administration and the very people she was elected to serve. The situation reached a critical turning point as investigations deepened and federal authorities ramped up their efforts to uncover the full extent of the misconduct. The people of Dalton, once inspired by Henyard's promises of renewal and revitalization, are now left grappling with the harsh reality of broken trust, battered finances, and a community deeply wounded by failed leadership. Tiffany Henyard's fall from grace is not just a personal tragedy. It is a stark warning about what can happen when ambition, ego, and unchecked power are allowed to fester at the heart of public service. When the FBI launched a full investigation into Tiffany Henyard's administration, Dalton was plunged into crisis. With state funds frozen and the town facing an ever-deepening financial catastrophe, Dalton shifted into emergency mode. Basic services remained unpaid, and the fiscal outlook grew increasingly grim with each passing day. The case of Boeing Thrash, a former Thornton Township employee, exemplified the retaliatory culture that critics say flourished under Henyard. Thrash claimed he was fired after declining a $100,000 raise, allegedly offered on the condition that he replace an attorney with someone favored by Henyard's assistant. When he refused, he was terminated. One of many reported instances of wrongful dismissal and political coercion. Additional allegations of harassment, retaliation, and abuse of power have only further tarnished Henyard's already battered reputation. One of the most disturbing claims came from former assistant Pete Dukes, who filed a lawsuit accusing Henyard of sexual harassment during a taxpayer-funded trip. After reporting the incident, Dukes was reportedly placed on unpaid medical leave, highlighting what many describe as a toxic and vindictive workplace culture within Henyard's administration. Meanwhile, Henyard's former top aide, Keith Freeman, has been charged with bankruptcy fraud and is rumored to be cooperating with federal investigators, potentially implicating Henyard in even deeper financial wrongdoing. As legal cases mount and more revelations come to light, the emerging picture is one of widespread mismanagement, retaliation, and personal enrichment at the public's expense. The financial toll on Dalton is staggering. The town now faces a $2 million deficit, millions of dollars in unpaid contracts, and total dysfunction across its municipal departments. Reports have surfaced about a $3 million issue involving untraceable blank checks, a 21% spike in police spending, and projected $65 million shortfall in the general fund. In response, residents have grown increasingly vocal, demanding accountability. Public outrage is mounting, with many calling for a complete overhaul of Dalton's leadership. While the freezing of state funds and the ongoing federal investigation may signal a turning point, the damage has already been done. Trust has been eroded, resources have been depleted, and morale among municipal workers is an all-time low. Henyard's once promising legacy of growth and revitalization has been overshadowed by scandal, dysfunction, and betrayal. The very community that once rallied behind her is now demanding justice, transparency, and an end to the culture of fear and retaliation that many say defined her administration despite mounting lawsuits and federal scrutiny. Henyard remains defiant, continuing to deflect blame rather than taking responsibility for the profound impact her leadership has had. For many in Dalton, the answer is clear. The town needs a clean break. Those involved in financial mismanagement, ethical breaches, and retaliatory practices must be held accountable. Restoring faith in Dalton's government will require more than just a change in leadership. It demands a complete cultural shift, one rooted in transparency, fiscal responsibility, and a genuine commitment to public service. Residents deserve leadership that is ethical, responsive, and reflective of the community's values. Principles Henyard once promised, but ultimately failed to uphold the shadow of federal investigations, frozen state funds, and mounting legal troubles is just the beginning of what promises to be a long and painful road to recovery. But for many in Dalton, the first step is unmistakable. The era of Tiffany Henyard must come to an end. Her administration will likely be remembered not for bold reforms or lasting improvements, but for scandal, corruption, and the staggering cost of unchecked power. Now, with her reputation in ruins and legal scrutiny intensifying, Dalton residents can only hope that justice will prevail, and that their town, battered but resilient, can finally begin the long process of healing.